5 minutes, right?
Yes. Ready? Okay. Good morning, Director Mueller. I want to begin by thank you for your service to our country.
So one thing that we didn't put in there that I was thinking we might want to add at the beginning is just one or two sentences to kind of acknowledge the work of the director and thank him.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, especially it'll be coming off a Republican examination where they'll undoubtedly attack him or the FBI.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Rhode Island.
So I think just thank you for your extraordinary service to our country and leading this investigation.
You could also throw in fair and independent investigation just so that we're highlighting that as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So then in 1.92, when we sat down last time, we had discussed being more clear, saying it would have effectively ended your investigation to the president and
into
his
the
campaign,
2016
correct?
Trump campaign. Is that correct?
He could try to pontificate and say, well, I can't speculate as to what the...
I think we should pay attention to how he's answering questions up to that point, because that is a question in which if he were trying to eat up time, could say, well, you know, it's really hard to know. It may be that we could have gotten information in a different way. And
I'm not going to adopt your characterization. I'll say that the facts as laid out in the report are accurate.
So do you want to read through
so let's read
and
through
time it?
Do you want to time it?
Yeah.
And who's going to just answer so that
I can play Mueller.
That would be accurate.
You got Mueller?
I'll be Mueller.
All right. I can watch time. Yeah.
Okay.
5 minutes, right? All
Yes.
right. Ready?
Okay. Good morning, Director Mueller. I want to begin by thank you for your service to our country and your very distinguished career in public service on behalf of the American people. Director Mueller, as you know, we are specifically focusing on 5 obstruction episodes here today. I'd like to ask you about the third of those 5 obstruction episodes. It is in the section of your report entitled, "The President's Efforts to Curtail the Special Counsel Investigation." And by curtail, you mean limit.
Correct?
Correct.
Yes.
My colleagues have walked through how the president tried to have you fired through the White House counsel.
He was not successful. And because the White House counsel refused the order,
the president asked others to help limit your investigation. Is that correct?
Correct?
That's correct.
Correct.
Was Corey Lewandowski one such individual?
He was.
And who is he?
He is a former Trump campaign official.
And to your knowledge, did he have any official position in the Trump administration?
He did not.
Did he have any official position in the Trump administration?
I don't believe so.
Your report describes an incident in the Oval Office involving Mr. Lewandowski on June 19, 2017, correct?
That's correct.
And that was just 2 days after the president called Don McGahn at home and ordered him to fire you. Is that correct?
Fire you, correct?
Yes.
Apparently so.
So right after his White House counsel, Mr. McGahn refused to follow the president's order to fire you. The president came up with a new plan. That was to go around all of his senior advisors and government aides to have a private citizen, his former campaign manager, to try to limit your investigation. What did the president tell Mr. Lewandowski to do?
Do you recall he told him, he dictated a message to Mr. Lewandowski for Attorney General Sessions and asked him to write it down. Is that correct?
True.
And did your team have access to this handwritten message?
Yes, we did.
I'm not going to get into what we may or may not have included in our investigation.
Okay, the message directed Sessions to give, and I'm quoting from your report, to give a public speech saying that he planned to meet with the special prosecutor to explain this is very unfair and let the special prosecutor move forward with investigating election meddling for future elections. That's at page 91. Is that correct?
Yes, I see that. Thank you. Yes, it is.
Did Mr. Lewandowski try to meet with the Attorney General to execute this plan?
He did.
In other words, Mr. Lewandowski, a private citizen, was instructed by the President of the United States to deliver a message from the President to the Attorney General that directed him to limit your investigation, correct?
Correct.
And did that meeting happen?
No, it did not.
Did the president raise the issue again with Mr. Lewandowski?
He did.
And what did the president say the next time he raised it?
He told Mr. Lewandowski that if Sessions
does not meet with you, Lewandowski should tell Sessions he was fired. Correct?
Correct.
We're out of time right there. So I think there's a couple of things that I was just...
Do you want us to move this last question then up higher, or should we just leave it in the order?
Leave it. I just think, so I think it would be useful to make those edits, and let me read through it one more time, and then we can time it.
Do you feel like you need any additional closing, or I think you should use all your time on substance. I don't know that you need to waste like 30 seconds on a closing, but...
The other thing I was thinking is I don't know that he would answer this, but it's a good way to remind people. Do you agree with the conclusion of 1,000 former Justice Department officials who said this evidence was sufficient to warrant the charging of a crime? I also think that's part of what the American people need to hear, that this, like anybody else, would be charged with obstruction of justice. Anybody else would be prosecuted and imprisoned, and the only reason that is not happening is because Donald Trump is the president of the United States, which, fundamentally feels wrong.
Mr. Mueller, you have seen the letter where 1,000 former Republican and Democratic federal prosecutors have read your report and said anyone but the president who committed those acts would be charged with obstruction of justice.
If the individual were not the president of the United States, he may still not want to speculate, but...
One way you could ask it is, are you familiar with this letter? Do you know any of the signatories? The answer is certainly yes.
Do you dispute any of the conclusions of the letter?
Yeah, are these people that you respect?
And is there anything in the letter you disagree with?
Okay.
And my guess is the answer to that is going to be no.
Yeah.
Do you agree with those former colleagues, 1,000 prosecutors who came to that conclusion?
Those prosecutors.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
After Representative Cicilline finished questioning Robert Mueller, he called on the House to begin an impeachment inquiry. Representative Cicilline joins us now from Capitol Hill. And Representative, first, we'd like to thank you for letting us see your preparation yesterday. It was really fascinating to see what someone goes through before they participate in a hearing like this. So thanks for that. And the last question you asked Robert Mueller about the 1,000 prosecutors, you didn't quite get an answer on that one, and it looked like he was about to. Were you surprised that Chairman Nadler didn't let him go there?
No, the chairman, I think, was very conscious of the time. We wanted to be sure that everyone on the committee had an opportunity to ask their questions, so he was pretty strict about the 5 minutes. But if you recall, Congressman the congressman who followed me asked that same question and attempted to get an answer, Congressman Swalwell, about the letter that was signed by over 1,000 federal prosecutors.
Were you surprised that Robert Mueller actually started answering the question? Because for a moment we were all on the edges of our seats because we thought he would just, immediately say, I'm not going to address that. And it looked like he was about to say something.
Yeah, I think the way he answered it when Congressman Swalwell asked that was those prosecutors had a different function or that. So I'm not sure he would have answered it, but I was just trying to make the point that other people who have reviewed your evidence said that it was sufficient to warrant an indictment on multiple counts of obstruction of justice.
After the hearing, you sent out a tweet calling for impeachment. Do you think your fellow Democrats are going to follow that lead after the vote on impeachment just failed in the House a few days ago?
Well, I think there's a growing number of my colleagues who have called for the beginning of an impeachment inquiry. And again, this is the beginning of the formal process before the Judiciary Committee to consider whether or not articles of impeachment should be filed. I've said for quite a while now there's more than enough evidence in the Mueller report to warrant that inquiry. I think particularly after the testimony of the special counsel today, where he really brought that report to life and walked through the very specific instances of criminal wrongdoing on the part of the president, that the urgency to begin this formal impeachment process is even more clear.
We saw how you prepared for today and then just how much what you actually said matched with your rehearsals. We saw a lot of representatives doing that where they didn't really improv or stray from what they wanted to say. How important was it for you to stick to that message even when you may not have been getting the answers you were looking for? Is the point just to get out what you're trying to say even if Robert Mueller is not going to answer your question?
Well, I think we were very strategic. We wanted to be sure that we covered all of the major actions, the episodes of obstruction in the Mueller report. And so we really planned to go through them sequentially. And I was assigned the responsibility of the Lewandowski obstruction of justice. So we wanted to be sure that we used Mr. Mueller's own words from the report to make sure the American people understood what he found, what evidence he uncovered, and using leading questions where you're reading back the special counsel's own words facilitated that. It did make for a little bit of a dry hearing sometimes, but it was really important to get the facts before the American people and have Mr. Mueller acknowledge what he found.
I know that prior to today, Robert Mueller said he really was going to stick to the contents of his 448-page report and let that be his testimony. Did anything he said today or anything that happened today or anything he didn't say today surprise you?
No, I think he was very consistent with the contents of his report. He reminded the American people that obstruction of justice is a serious offense, that it strikes at the heart of our justice system. And then he recounted for the American people the evidence he collected of the president committing 10 specific acts of obstruction of justice. So he really, I think, very soberly, in a kind of very prosecutor's way, walked through the report without a lot of emotion, in a very kind of yes and no way. But I think the hearing was important because it laid before the American people, many people for the first time, hearing what was actually in the report, what he actually discovered in his 22-month investigation.
We're waiting in just a few moments for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to talk about today's testimony. I don't know if you had an opportunity to hear, but just a little while ago, the president addressed it from the South Lawn. He called this a devastating day for Democrats. He said that Robert Mueller did not do well and that he had nothing to go on. How would you respond to that?
Well, the president obviously didn't watch the hearing. The special counsel made it clear that this investigation was not a hoax, it was not a witch hunt, and he did not exonerate the president. And then in addition to that, he walked the American people through the damning evidence he collected of the president's criminality, of the president's effort to stop this investigation. He started with the discussion of the widespread and systematic attack on our democracy by the Russians, the fact that the Trump campaign benefited from that and welcomed it, and then the president engaged in an ongoing cover-up as well as an effort to stop the investigation and prevent Mr. Mueller from doing his work. So I think it was a very bad day for the president, very clear evidence of criminality, and again, made it very clear that the investigation was not a hoax, not a witch hunt, and emphatically did not exonerate the president of the United States.
Representative Cicilline, we thank you so much for your time both today and yesterday.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.